like to just to say welcome everybody to Midweek Matters. It's our speaker session this week is on self-advocacy, and we are so lucky, following on from the fantastic session we had with Beth Moolen a couple of weeks ago. We're very excited to have a panel of speakers with us this week. So just some of the housekeeping. Any opinions are all valid. We just want to make sure everyone has the space to make their thoughts heard, but respectful to everybody. And the session is open to everybody and will be uploaded hopefully very soon onto our YouTube channel. And we are going to structure this evening with 2 speakers, then a Q&A, and then a second set of speakers and the Q&A. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our 4 speakers tonight: Carrie-Anne Lightly, Harry Baker, Brian Emos, and Kieran Day. So I'm going to put Carrie-Anne, I'm going to put you on spotlight or pin, and hopefully get you on the screen.
Thanks.
There we go. Carrie-Anne, thank you for joining us, and I'm going to hand your introduction over to you.
Thanks, Miriam. Lovely to be with you all this evening. So my name's Carrie-Anne Lightly. My work really focuses on accessible travel. I write and speak on accessible travel and create a lot of accessible travel content. My day job is that I'm head of marketing for Advocacy. We're the UK's leading provider of detailed disabled access information. And I'm an ambassador for UP. I'm very proud to be an ambassador for UP. So my work does generally focus on travel and accessibility of venues, but today in my chat about self-advocacy, I'm going to focus more on sort of personal health and well-being, because I think that that's where I can really speak to some self-advocacy learning and journey there. And I think I want to start by talking about when Miriam first invited me to do this session. So Miriam emailed me a couple of weeks ago and asked me if I'd like to be involved. And I said, yes, I'd love to. And I saw the topic and I thought, oh gosh, it's something I'm so passionate about and something that I just love to share my experience about. But I really struggle with spending too much time at a computer in the evening, because I spend a lot of time at a computer during the day. And I find that when I have done things like this in the past, either I've had to cancel at the last minute or I've done it and then felt quite well afterwards. And I thought, there must be a middle ground somewhere, because I don't want to not do it. I'm really passionate about this. And so I asked Miriam if there is any way that I could just join for a short time so that I can still get some rest time in this evening. And she said, yes, of course you can. We'd love to have you. And it wasn't until yesterday when I started just writing a few little notes for this session that I thought, there we go. There's an example of self-advocacy in action, an example of me sharing really what I needed and putting my own boundaries in place, but in a way that's flexible enough for me to still be able to join and still be able to hopefully share some information with the rest of you that is kind of inspiring and insightful, and yeah, just let you into my journey a little bit. So yeah, we're practicing what we preach, aren't we? So when I think about self-advocacy and I think about my journey through it up to now, and I will say one of the things I said when we were meeting in the beginning before we let anybody else in is that I don't think that self-advocacy is a journey that you can ever complete, really. I think that you're always learning, because things are always changing. People's needs are always different, situations are always different. So I'm just really speaking to what I've learned in my journey so far, really. And I think if I take it back to basics, before you can really truly self-advocate and advocate for your own needs, I think you need to have an understanding of what those needs are and how you think they might be able to be met. And that sounds quite simple when I say it like that. But I think, you know, my journey through and to that is that myself and a lot of other people that I've spoken to with CP, particularly who went to mainstream school, you know, we often spent a lot of our younger lives making our needs smaller or hiding our needs or trying to fit in as best we could with what we saw as being normal, trying to distract and take attention away from anything that we felt made us different or stand out. And I think that kind of that internalizes this thought or feeling that actually my needs don't matter, that actually it's more important that other people are comfortable, and so I'll just make my needs smaller. And I think that I unconsciously and knowingly lived like that for quite a while. And then, you know, as I've got a bit older, as I've met more disabled people, particularly as I've spent quite a lot of time in therapy, in counselling, discussing various thoughts and feelings around all of this kind of stuff, you know, I've discovered that actually, you know, my needs as a person with cerebral palsy, as a person with multiple medical conditions, they don't make me odd. They don't make me weird. They're not my fault. And they're not something that I just have to kind of make do or put up with or make smaller for other people. Our differences are what make us ourselves. And I think, you know, the key part of my journey to self-advocacy has been allowing myself to have those needs, allowing myself to say, okay, I need to do things differently sometimes. And sometimes I need to ask for help. Sometimes I need to ask for, you know, medication, aids, equipment, whatever it might be, to allow those needs, to allow them to be front and center. And you know, as I say, really give myself permission to do that, give myself permission to be unapologetic about who I am and how I live my life and what my needs are. Because we all deserve solutions. We all deserve to be able to find ways to live that help us to, I suppose, get over barriers, that help us to live in ways that is easier. You know, life with cerebral palsy can be tough, can be difficult. We deal with pain, fatigue, energy issues, all different kinds of, you know, it's all a spectrum. And I think it's also about like saying that and saying that's like, it is difficult, and it's okay to say it's difficult, and it's okay to say that we need solutions. And really how I went about finding out how my needs could be met or researching solutions was discussion with other people in the community, was absolutely, you know, finding out about the experiences of others. So as an example, I had a misdiagnosis for quite a long time. I was diagnosed with general anxiety and panic disorder for the majority of my adult life. And I can see Miriam smiling. It's clearly a common experience. I think it's also quite a common experience in women specifically. And around 2.5 years ago, I got to a burnout point, essentially. I got to a point where I wasn't able to work. I was struggling with eating and keeping food in. I was struggling with energy. I was constantly feeling anxious all of the time. And I discovered as part of this journey that actually I have IBS, and these nausea attacks that I've faced for most of my life when I've been stressed, that I've been really, really scared about, worried about, they weren't a problem with me. It wasn't my issue. It was, you know, something connected to my CP. And I think as I was trying to figure that out, as I was trying to go, okay, I know I need to see a doctor and I know we need to find some solutions, but something just doesn't feel right. These labels don't feel like they fit me properly. I would do things like post in the brilliant Facebook group that we've all got for adult support, and I chat to other people with CP on Twitter, and I discovered then that IBS is actually a huge commonality in adults with CP, and that when you begin to understand actually what that is, muscle spasms happening in the bowel, well, it's not surprising, is it really? Because a lot of us deal with spasms and muscle tension, and there's an example, I think, of how we can come together as a community and share our own experiences in a way that helps shine a light on the experiences of others and helps other people to understand, oh, maybe that's what I'm going through. Maybe actually this thing that I've been told that I am is not the case, and maybe I know my body a little bit better, and maybe I can learn from the experiences of other people who face similar issues. Another thing that kind of struck me when I was thinking about self-advocacy and advocating for my own needs was around startle reflex specifically. So startle reflex, I think, is one of the most challenging symptoms of cerebral palsy that we all have to deal with. It is something that when I was a child, everybody would laugh when, the teacher clapped a board marker and I jumped or something like that. It was generally seen as an amusement point for most of my life. And again, it was one of those things that I internalized as making me a bit weird, a bit odd, a bit different. I had no idea until I was 18 years old that startle reflex was even a thing, or even a thing in connection with cerebral palsy. I just thought that I was a bit frightened and jumpy and odd. And first of all, discovering that, finding out that fact that it's a cerebral palsy thing, is part of my neurology, and so it's not my fault. Well, that changed the game, and that actually, nowadays, my startle reflex is obviously still there, but it's nowhere near as severe. It's nowhere near as prevalent because I'm not frightened of it anymore. I understand it. I understand why it's happening and what it is. It's not particularly pleasant, but I'm no longer worried about ridicule or how it looks to other people or anything like that, because I have a deeper knowledge and understanding of it. And, how I've tried to advocate around that, for example, when I was office-based before I worked from home, I had an arrangement that, I'd come in late on the day that we were doing the fire alarm test, because actually my experiences up until that point of fire alarm tests were me sitting in the corner of the office just waiting for it to happen, feeling terrified and just anxiety spiral basically. And the reason I bring that example up is I think that it is a good example of how you can combine knowledge and experience with asking for what you need. So hopefully that resonates. It's certainly been a game changer for me. It sounds like a really small thing, but just removing needless anxiety in a way that really works for me, and in a way that actually doesn't impact other people at all. Nobody else minds. It changed the game. I think I've got two more little examples that I want to give, so hopefully that's all right. Hopefully we're okay for time and everything. So another example, and this is related specifically to healthcare and to startle reflex and sort of neurological overwhelm, as I like to term it. So I really struggle with anything that is any form of invasive when it comes to medical appointments, etc. And that could be anything from a flu jab to a dental clean to something like a smear test. I really struggle, and I describe it as my nervous system is in like overwhelm point, because there's just so much happening. You're already a little bit nervous because you're going to a medical appointment and nobody likes that, frankly. And then it's all the tension of all this needles coming, or all this clean's going to happen here, and how can I cope with it? It's too much. And I sort of found out by accident from having to go for some treatment and just really, really feeling so anxious about it and speaking to my GP about it. My GP saying, okay, well, why don't we try some diazepam? That might just help you to calm down a bit. And actually, I get dual benefit there, because what I've discovered is that it not only helps me to feel calm in my brain, but it also helps to calm down that nervous system overwhelm, which means that then I don't get the jerky movements when the dentist puts the cleaner thing into my mouth or when the injection goes in, and it just makes it all so much more manageable. And that's something that I've really kind of had to learn on my own, I think, through a bit of trial and error, because as you'll all know, GPs have quite limited knowledge of CP. So my GP couldn't have predicted that that was going to happen because she didn't know that that was a potential. And it's really been through me trying that and then going back and advocating for myself and saying, okay, this is what works for me. So you need to put this on repeat prescription for me so that I can access it when I need to for medical appointments. And I don't have to face any of that anxiety and everything goes much better. So I think that's just an example of almost, as I say, coming across something accidentally and experimenting around how it might be able to work for you. And then my last example is around my journey back into the sort of medical system, as it were. So my journey to finding neurophysio as an adult and accessing that on the NHS. It was actually when I first discovered UP, or Adult CP Hub, as it was then. I was having quite a lot of issues with pain and injuries as I entered my early 30s. And I think that's quite a common experience amongst a lot of us. And that sort of opened my brain up to say, okay, right, you're in pain, you're getting injured more often. Like, you've done really well at not having any support from the medical profession for the last 10 years or however long it's been, but maybe now's the time for you to try and ask for some more help. And I started tweeting about it, and one of my followers, a lady called Lucy, linked me to the UP website at the time and said, there's loads of research here, you should have a look. And that was I suppose where our association began, really. And I knew quite quickly that I wanted to get to the point where I could try walking with a K-walker frame again. I did that for a lot of my childhood and stopped when I went to secondary school. And like much of the kind of medical intervention decisions that were taken during my childhood and teenage years, I wasn't in the driving seat for that. It was decided by the professionals around me. And this time I really wanted to change that. I knew what I wanted. I also kind of knew, I think, that I had the ability to do it. I wasn't really sure because it had been a long time, but I knew that I used to be able to do it really well and I'd like to have another go. But it took me about 18 months to persuade any physio that was the reality, because they just would not believe me. They just looked at me and went, well, you've spent the last 20 years plus whatever in a wheelchair, not using a frame, not walking, and you can't straighten your legs. So how are you going to be able to do it? And I actually took my mum to one of the first appointments with me when we were trying the parallel bars, and it was really helpful because it gave us a different dynamic. She wasn't in charge. I was still in charge. I was in the driving seat. But what she was able to say to the physio was, yeah, I can see Carrie-Anne standing up there and she doesn't look like she's in much a different position than she was when she was 10 years old. And she walked with a frame every single day then. So you might think it's not possible, but we know differently. And through my own sort of tenacity, I was given a chance to try. And I am now using a frame daily, just around the house. It's not a way for me to get around outside of that. It never was going to be that, but just as a different kind of option for getting around as I get older and things get a bit more challenging. So I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about. And I think I just want to kind of sum up all of that by saying you are the expert in yourself and your needs and your body and your mind and your health and your well-being. Nobody else knows better than you what you need. And if you can kind of get over that barrier to allow yourself that need and say, I am the expert, I think it really changes the game. Thank you.
Oh, I've lost Carrie Ann and I've just put me there. I'm so sorry. There we go. That's what I wanted to do. Carrie Ann, thank you so much. It's always brilliant to hear people and the journeys, and knowing you for a number of years now, it's very exciting to hear the progress in the way of I think we are going to go on to the speaker soon, but I think of taking back some of the ownership that I think that we found that over the years people are lost when they were young adults, children and young adults, and knew that that's what we should be doing, but didn't quite know how to do it. So there's this mismatch of skills. So I'm going to hold the questions, Dean, if that's okay. And we're going to go straight on to Harry. So I'm going to try and unspot you there and then add Harry in. And Harry, thank you also for joining us this evening. And I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself and share with us your thoughts on self-advocacy.
Yeah, so I'm Harry. I have cerebral palsy. I currently play football for the England cerebral palsy football team. I've just come back from the European Championships, where we finished seconds. We won our first major competition. And I think self-advocacy is a very, very important thing that we need to remember, but also be mindful for that others do not understand, living with a disability or don't understand disability because they've never experienced it before. So I think for me, self-advocacy is very important in the sense that we need to understand what we want and what we need and how we communicate that to people. I think that's an important part of it, is how we communicate. When I was younger, I really struggled with my communication. I used to get frustrated, and it would lead to me lashing out and doing things that I'd regret. So I think it's really important that when we are, maybe getting frustrated or finding things difficult, we take a time out or take a bit of time to look at ourselves and think maybe partly understanding how we feel or how this is difficult for us. We have to remember sometimes people don't understand it. They've not been educated in this. A personal story for me was when I was younger, I've always been football crazy, and I wasn't allowed to play football for my own age group because of my disability. And at the time, I think it's because I'm disabled, and they're thinking, oh, he can't do it, I can't do what they do. But actually, it turns out, looking from hindsight, that they didn't understand my disability.
Harry, can you hear us? We seem to be having a technical issue.
He's either he's dropped out or his Wi-Fi.
It does appear that.
Yeah.
Hi. Here comes Harry.
Sorry, my internet is having an absolute moment at the best time.
Don't worry. I'll just pin you back on. There we go. Thank you for getting back in, which is great. And I will let you continue. You were talking about that the football, they didn't really understand your disability.
Yeah, I do remember. So they basically said that I could play my own age group, but they could then monitor that. So they could obviously tell the other children to, be a bit kinder, go a bit easier. But then I wouldn't play in fixtures, and my poor mother had to drive me all around the country to go play in these fixtures. And I didn't play for 2 whole seasons, which left me feeling really deflated and, obviously very upset. And obviously did some things and said some things I probably shouldn't have done. But that was all because I was so upset and frustrated, and that's because I wasn't allowed to play in games. Whereas my time had been taken away from me. I wasn't given an opportunity to try and do these things myself because of other people's thoughts and opinions of how it might impact me. And I think it's very important that, at that age, I was very young. I was only, 8 or 9. So it's hard to express how you feel at that age, especially, coming to terms that you've got a disability. But I think as adults, that is, you sometimes to express to people that you can do these things. I had similar situations in schools, going to a mainstream school, going on residentials. They're like, oh, Harry, you don't need to do the climbing wall. You don't need to do this because, you're not going to be able to. And I've always had that attitude that, no, I'll do it. I'll do what I can. If I can't do it as everyone else, then I can't. And I still get frustrated today when I'm trying to do things. Like doing buttons up on a shirt is an absolute disaster. But that's very important. But I think it's knowing your limitations. I give everything a go. And as long as you try your best at whatever you do, no one can say anything. But don't be afraid to ask for help. My poor girlfriend has to do all my shirts up all the time. I think she's sick and tired of it. But, I just know that doing my right shirt up on my right sleeve, not a chance. So just finding out what you can and can't do, but try not to get frustrated when you can. I'm still developing, still learning. I still get frustrated at certain things and I shouldn't do, and that might be because of my feelings, my moods. And everyone's different days. Everyone's bubbly, you're quieter, you're calmer, you're more tired, and it's understanding that. But it's being open and honest about how you feel and what you want, because whatever you want is available to whatever else wants. Remember to compromise as well, because it's not all about you. But it's very, very important to share how you're feeling, what you want, how you can do this, because just because you've got cerebral palsy doesn't mean that you can't achieve what everyone else is doing. It might take you a different way, might have done past. The best way to look at it, if you want to climb the peak of that mountain, some people will be able to go straight up the mountain, some people have to go around the mountain, some people have to go round, up, round. Every path is different, it still gets to the same point. So it doesn't matter how you do it, get there and do it. So don't be afraid to ask. That's my biggest message. Don't be afraid to ask and just be completely honest, because someone might come up to you and you might think either being rude or they're saying, okay, why do you do this? Why do you walk like that? Why do you walk with a limp? But it's not. A lot of the time it's because they don't understand and they're inquisitive. And it's important to embrace that inquisitiveness, because if you tell them, they're going to tell someone else. And they pass that message on about cerebral palsy. The more they learn, the more well educated they come. So when they come into contact with someone later in their life with cerebral palsy, they can help them do what may be best for them. Whereas if you then shut that down, but no, I'm not talking about it, you can't expect them to help you in the future because they don't understand. They're probably not going to ask again because they feel like they've offended you. So it's very important that you're open, honest, and sometimes people might cross the boundaries that you're not okay talking about, but that's okay. Just tell them you don't feel comfortable talking about this right now, or you don't feel comfortable talking about it at all. That's absolutely fine, because it's your body, it's your choice, it's about you. It's very, very important to try and be open on this and try and share what you want and help others understand what you want and what you need, because together we can really achieve a lot. That's all I've really got to say on advocacy, to be honest.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much, Harry.
No problem.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring Carrie-Anne back in, if that's okay. And I'm going to open the floor. If anyone has any questions at this stage of the evening they would like to ask Harry or Carrie-Anne. Dean, you've got your hand up. Would you like to?
Thank you, Miriam. Wonderful presentation, Harry and Carrie-Anne. Wonderful presentations, respectively. And good to particularly hear about your experiences with football, Harry, because I'm not an expert on football, but it's interesting. I think every player with CP probably has their own story, their own story to tell, and yours was very interesting. Carrie-Anne, I thought what you said was interesting about start reflex, because I remember amongst my peers, particularly in Rochdale, at secondary school in Rochdale, when the bell used to go, and it was one of those, and this is in the 1980s, and there was a big bell, it was a massive bell, and they only had one tone.
I know, I feel like I can hear it. I feel like I know exactly what you mean, and like I can hear it.
5 people in electric wheelchairs all of a sudden go,
yeah.
And it was quite, and I was a bit naughty. I was always a bit naughty at school. We used to laugh. because, but we did it. It was just, it wasn't being nasty. It was just kind of,
Didn't know any better.
It was, but you know, I mean, it was, but you know, but now I'm getting reflex. So reflex, some sort of like sorry, what do we call it? Shock.
Startle.
Yeah, startled. Yeah, I'm getting a bit of startled. You know, sometimes, and so I think it's sort of coming back to me. You know, to haunt me a bit, and mainly I get it when I'm relaxing. Some, you know, when I'm in that thing of, or say I've been walking like a bit over, you know, over walking and things like that, and you know, or use my legs a lot, I should say. And it's just when you sat down and relax, and it just you know, the nerves in your legs, you know, just so, you know. But I thought it was an interesting, you know, it was an interesting point that, and it wasn't just people in wheelchairs; it was other people as well. But it was, yeah, it kind of took me back that. So thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. That was great. And Sarah, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I remember the fire alarm at my school, and they used to put it on in assembly every once or twice a year. They would put it in assembly for us all to hear. We didn't actually do anything like go to fire escape. We just actually have to hear it, say it. And the pain and anguish I had because it was so loud. I started screaming because of the startle and it just the sound, because I think people with CP have extra sense in hearing, because like loud like screeching or, you know, pop. And also I don't like when I go and see a play or music and they have like a gunshot or a crack. I get really, really phobic with that. I start to get really bad anxiety to the point where I had to tell the people, can you escort me out before the loud crack? You know, the crack, because also it doesn't my hearing as well, super sensitive. So yeah, so but I realised that my startle has got worse as I got older. Like when I was young in school, I don't think I had that bad. But as I got older, it's like nearly everything.
I think that what's fascinating listening to you, Sarah, is not only are you able to share your self-advocacy experience at theatre, but also feeding on from what Carrie-Anne was saying about reaching out to the community to find out if it's, you know, I think like what we've said previously, a CP thing. And that's information and knowledge, and therefore that helps inform how you deal with it and what you might want to do to continue to help yourself in that. So, and I suppose that's one of the reasons why, you know, having a community to share things with is very powerful. Thank you so much for your input, Sarah. And I'm going to bring Emma in now, because I think she was the one who had her hand up next.
Thanks, Miriam.
Emma.
You're doing a brilliant job today.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, I know that it's obviously staying on the theme of starter research, but I wanted to share an experience with me, for me, and just kind of open up the conversation a little bit, because it's something we experienced. We talked about last month when we were talking about independent living and different people's perception. So when I was in hospital, I was in a very nice hospital and it was really lovely, and they wanted to treat me with the utmost respect. So what they did every time they entered my room that they knocked on the door, and I just had hip surgery, and every time they knocked on the door that sent me into some sort of startle, which then pulled on my hip replacement, and it was incredibly painful. Now, sitting in this room, and I'm quite good at advocating for myself, but one of the things that you find when you're in hospital, I find once you've got the band on your wrist, that becomes a little bit more difficult. But yeah, I still tried to explain to them that actually, you know, I didn't mind if they didn't knock on the door and actually just please come in, because actually, but it was really hard, because from their point of view, they were being polite and they were following protocol, and me asking them to do something was difficult for them. And that is that I'm not being difficult, but this is what I actually need. And if you are being a hospital that wants to provide the need care that I want, I'm telling you that actually that's not helpful. And the reason that I link that to the independent living is people's expectations of what you want are probably are often different from where you're at. So and it's often done with good intention and goodwill, but almost telling them that, then it becomes a challenging situation, and like you're displeased with them, or you're challenging their kindness, and actually then it becomes a personal thing. And I didn't know what you thought about that, and I don't know if I've explained that in any clear way, but
I think you have. I think you've explained it really well, and I think to me, a lot of this is linked to I'd like to call myself a reformed people pleaser, because I would, as I alluded to in a lot of my talk, I would spend a lot of time just, I was at the bottom of the list and everybody else's needs kind of came first. And I like your experience that you speak to there, Emma. Like to me, like it makes total sense that you'd ask for that, and the fact that them knocking on the door is ultimately like hindering your recovery. It's just such a frustrating thing, isn't it? So I think, I think what I want to say on that is that we don't need to feel that we're being unkind or that we're being rude if we're challenging other people's assumptions. There's ways that we can do that without being unkind or being rude. And just because something is led by goodwill or politeness doesn't mean you have to accept it if it's not what you need. So I do feel like some of this is almost kind of getting over like British politeness. Like we can all be polite and we can all do the kind of norm conversation thing, but actually if that's not what works for you, and if you are just sort of going along with it to be polite, then the only person that loses out in that situation is you. And you know, the whole theme of this is self-advocacy, and being your own advocate is all about saying, yeah, my needs are important too. What I need is just as important as what you need, even if my need is a little bit different. And I think the last thing that I wanted to say, and this struck me when you said about, you know, they struggle to get their heads around like not knocking on the door. That was difficult for them and it wasn't following protocol. And I think what I want to say there is, you know, sometimes meeting your needs is going to be difficult. Sometimes it's not going to feel comfortable for people. Sometimes it's going to feel uncomfortable. That's all right. That's okay. And that's also kind of, that's not a problem. Like that's not your problem almost. If somebody else feels uncomfortable at meeting a need that you've asked for in a clear and polite way, that's kind of on them to figure that out.
more. But I guess it's to do with your background, isn't it? Not making a fuss and not being difficult is something that I grew up as a mantra.
Yeah, the same.
It's about challenging yourself as well as challenging other people. That's kind of the themes that I'm hearing, that we've got to do two things. We've got to challenge ourselves as well as challenging the environment or the people around.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that what I've often found is in challenging myself in that way, you know, you have all these thoughts about, well, this person's going to think I'm being rude, or they're going to think I'm being difficult, or this thing's going to happen, this bad thing's going to happen. 99% of the time, none of those bad things happen. And actually everything just goes okay. And the more you can give yourself and your brain positive examples of that, like here's an example of where I pushed the boundaries. Here's an example of where I did something that I was a little bit uncomfortable with, but actually it turned out brilliantly. The easier it's going to get.
That's my new mantra, by the way, Carrie Ann. I often, you know how we were all brought up to say, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? So I often found myself saying that to my children. What's the worst? I've changed that now. I always say to them, what's the best thing that could happen in this situation? And we've all got to try and change our mindsets.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I'm going to move on to Beth now. So Beth, I'm going to just spotlight you. And then would you like to share your comments, questions?
Brilliant talks, Carrie Ann and Harry. This is for both of you. If you could give advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a very, very good question. What would I give my younger self? I was very, very emotional as a younger self, and I was very not very rational at all. I must say, I don't know. So I would probably say, and I was probably in a very dark place when I was growing up, because as probably most people, didn't want to be disabled, and actually it's what makes us so special. So looking back on it, I'd be like, it's all going to be okay. You're actually going to appreciate the opportunities and experiences that your disability is going to give you. So ride it out, you can keep your head up and keep going, because life's going to turn out good in the end.
I think I would say to my younger self, you're going to go on a journey, and the more that you learn about who you are and what you need and what makes you you, and the more that you tap into that, and the more that you bring it out in your life and stop hiding it, the happier you're going to feel. And you're going to get to this place where you're not worried about other people's opinion. You're not worried about anything like that, and that you can just focus on unapologetically living the life that works for you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Beth and Carrie Ann and Harry. I've got one question to ask before we move on to our other two fantastic speakers. Carrie Ann and Harry, I know that you mentioned both in your introductions that you have done some travelling, and I just wondered if you had had any experiences within travelling that you've had to really dig deep with your self-advocacy, where people have maybe not been as open-minded as you'd like them to be.
Yeah, I think there's been lots of cases, really. I think I've been very fortunate that the majority of traveling I've done is with football. So with football, I'm in a squad of 14 players who've all got a cerebral palsy as well. So we're like kind of a little bubble. When you walk around in your England kit across the airports, everyone's interested who you are, and they all think you're the under-21 squad, not the disabled squad. So that's always fun to tell them you're not. But I'm not too sure. I think if you go to different cultures and they don't understand it, and I think it's not always easy, and they don't understand what it is, and trying to explain it to people, and they don't quite fully understand why you limp or why you do that in a certain way. But I think for me, with traveling, I mean, it's going there and just accepting the culture. I think you have to understand that it's not our culture. It's not being polite, or it's not, they aren't going to understand us. I think as British, we're terrible. We don't know enough languages, so we have no right to say anything to them, really. But I think it's really, really important that we go there and go and experience these cultures, and whatever daunting or whatever fear you might have, because I'm going to climb Kilimanjaro in August, so that's my next challenge.
Oh.
So yes, it's not like a nice little short stroll up a mountain for me. So that's my next challenge. But I think it's just important to try and take these things head on, because I might not do it, I might fail, but if I fail, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, as long as I can say I've given everything I've done the best I can, and no one can ask much more of me, really.
Amazing. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Carrie-Anne.
I often say when I speak on accessible travel specifically that, you know, traveling as a disabled person is rarely easy. It's often fraught with difficulty and challenges and uncertainty and anxiety. But it is nearly always worth all of that when you get to your destination at the end of it. And I think with travel, as with any kind of interaction with a lot of other members of the public who maybe aren't as disability educated, you know, you're always going to come across people who don't understand things in the same way that you do, or people who haven't had a lived experience of disability, so just don't really get it. So for example, you know, I travel on the train quite a lot for work, and often independently on my own. I will sometimes transfer out of my chair to sit in a train seat because I get really bad motion sickness, so I can't travel like facing the wrong way. I can't travel backwards. So I'll get out of my chair, transfer over, and oftentimes when that happens, people will sort of start looking at the empty wheelchair and be like, can I just move this so I can put my bag here, or can I just, and often I just say, like, you know, please don't touch that, because actually it costs quite a lot of money, and it's my independence, it's my legs. And so I think you almost take on this role of being an educator, whether you want to or not, in that kind of a situation. And, you know, sometimes that can be daunting and difficult. But I also have learned that, like, if I don't speak up for that in that situation, then nobody else is going to. Nobody else is going to speak up for me. Nobody else is going to be my advocate in that situation. And actually, I could end up with a broken wheelchair because somebody's just been a little bit careless. They don't mean to, but, you know, crammed in suitcases and packed trains and all that sort of thing, they're challenging environments. So I think that's almost an example of kind of self-advocacy by necessity, not always really because I want to, because sometimes I don't really feel like I want to stick my neck out and have that conversation, but equally I want to be able to get home with my wheelchair in one piece. And so I suppose that's kind of the weighing up of, okay, I could stay quiet and that would maybe make me a little bit more comfortable. I wouldn't have to face this uncomfortable thing, but then there's a risk that this might happen. And actually, you know, if I speak up and put myself in the uncomfortable situation, generally, you know, something more positive will happen, and at least I may have given somebody the context of a different mindset.
Brilliant. Thank you both of you so much for kicking off part one. I'm gonna unspotlight you and invite our next speaker, who is Bryony Moss. If she is around, yes, there she is. I'm just trying to find you. Bryony, I am going to say thank you for opening part two of this evening's panel, and I'm going to leave you to introduce yourself. Thank you for joining us.
Can you hear me, first of all?
Yes.
Okay, that's good, because I was having a bit of trouble with the sound. So my name's Bryony. I'm 25. I have cerebral palsy, right hemiplegia, and I am a disabled actor, model, and disability mental advocate. For me, advocacy has been an ongoing journey of self-discovery and acceptance through growing up. So I thought I'd just pick a couple, maybe 2, 3 examples. So I'm going to start with the most recent one, which was actually today. I went to the cafe with my support worker, and I needed the loo, so I went straight to the disabled loo. And as I came out, closed the door, this lady looked up at me, up and down, and just shook her head and tutted. And she was quite elderly, and I said, "Oh, sorry, I was just using that." And she was like, but you're using the disabled loan. I said, yeah. And she's like, but you're not disabled, you're not in a wheelchair. And so I'm quite used to people, because my disability looks hidden, like getting comments like that. And instead of going and getting all upset, I said, well, actually, I've got a hidden disability. I have cerebral palsy, and I also can have seizures, so I need more space. It takes me quite a long time because I'm quite slow. I'm quite also claustrophobic. I don't like, loads of people next to you, even though you're in cubicles. It just freaks me out. So yeah, I think sometimes people will say things and it's like a thought and they're just saying it rather than thinking before saying, but you're not gonna I don't want to use the word educate because that sounds a bit harsh, but this woman was quite surprised and she was like, oh. And it was quite funny because we started talking about just other things, like I have a blue badge and she has a blue badge, and we were just having like jokes. And actually, she was actually like, I've actually learned something today from you, so thanks. And I was like, no problem. So that was just a small one that happened today. Growing up, I think advocacy mainly came from my parents because, you're a child and they kind of sort everything out for you. And when you're a child, you just think, you don't have any worries and everything's hunky-dory. But I was bullied for lots of different reasons, one of them being having CP. But when I was about 14, I also developed mental health conditions, and one of those was dissociative seizures. And this meant that I would just shake uncontrollably. I fall, I collapse. I had to be in a wheelchair for quite a while. And this actually affected my experience with college. So I really wanted to do performing arts at college, and I do with the audition. Well, sometimes I wouldn't even get to audition stage because the tutors would say to me, because of your disability, you cannot do this course. So I said, okay, I'll do this course in the meantime whilst I try and do the course I really want to do. I'll get there eventually. I was at this one college and I did adult learning for people with disabilities for a year to show them that I could cope in the classroom. My mum had to take me, and they didn't like that. And so when I went for the interview for the college course, they said, okay, we don't really want you because you have to bring your mum. And I'm like, well, I don't really want to have my mum. As much as I love her, I don't want her all the time. So I said, right, so what can we do about this? And they were like, well, we can't really do the course. So my mum looked into having some sort of extra support for me. I tried supported living. That didn't really go to plan. So then we thought, plan B, support worker. So I now have a support worker who's an absolute star and angel. And she's like the little psychic. Well, I call her my psychic, like a psychic angel. And she has helped me so much. So I was able to go to college. I was able to complete a course in a subject I really wanted to do. It took a long time, but it's got me into a place where I'm really happy and confident in myself. I'm now with an agency. I've had work. She comes with me with self-tapes and auditions. I've actually been very open about having a disability and saying, I would love to work with you, but I have to have my support worker with me because I can't travel independently. So most people, not everyone, but 99.9% have actually been like, oh, we didn't actually think this was a thing. But they've been very accommodating. They've helped me. They've allowed me to have my support worker. They've paid for her to be with me so I can still do what I want to do and contribute to society. So that's been really good. I think it's also just like opening up. So I work with a theatre company once a week, and we work with children of all different ages, all different abilities, all different types of disabilities. And it's really interesting to see how they have responded to comments in the school environment, especially with splints, because when I was growing up, I wore a splint and I'd get comments about my splint, like, oh, what's that? Or I'd be called peg leg or other strange things. And quite a few of the young people that I work with have now got splints. So we've been able to talk about splints and kind of normalize it, and they don't feel so alone. They've given their splints names, or their walkers names, or their wheelchairs the names, which has really helped them. I think it's literally just like letting people know, but also knowing that that person might not mean it to be offensive. They literally just don't know, and it's that then that's your chance to sort of educate them and tell them. Especially for me with hospital appointments, they didn't want my mum coming in with me, but I can't deal with too much information, so I tend to zone out. So I said, okay, I'm going to bring my support worker. So I brought my support worker and I zoned out. And actually, when I zoned back in again, my psychiatrist said, well, that was a really good chat with your support worker, because like they're telling me things that you can't see when you're in a seizure, or when this happens or that happens. So I think it's just making people aware, but also being aware that you have to maybe think, okay, this person might not mean it in this sort of way, they might just actually not know, and then that's your chance to kind of tell them and make them more aware, so then they can go and tell people they know, or if they see someone again and all they have like a splint, or they're shaking or anything like that, they don't just stare, because I'd rather people ask me questions than just stared at me and just yeah. I think that's all I wanted to say.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. I think it's oh, I've just knocked you off. I was doing quite well. I think it's really insightful getting the perspective that you've given us, and I don't want to ask you any questions at the moment, but I've got loads of things going on in my mind, so I'm gonna say to everyone else, hold off and let's go. Thank you, Bryony, and then
No problem.
over to Kieran, who I'm going to spotlight now, and then you can come in and join us. And Kieran, the last but definitely not definitely not the least member of our panel tonight, and I'm going to hand over to you to share your experiences with us.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Karen. I'm an actor. I've just finished uni, thank the Lord. Got my results today, thank God that's over with. I am here to talk about access riders. And these are a new thing coming into the film and TV world, but I think they're applicable to whatever area that you work in or live in. An access rider is basically a document that you control, that you write in, that you have complete agency over, and you basically write what you need to do your job, or to do, it could be for your education, it literally can be whatever you need it to be. So I have one for work to work. My agent sends it off before I do a job, so the production team know how they can support me. And for me, it works really well because I don't have to answer the same questions over and over again, because before I had an access rider, it was always how wide your wheelchair, and etc. etc. So with this, I literally just say, with the access rider, I don't even need to say it anymore because they just do it. So I think I would advise everybody to get an access rider. I've also included a lot about the social model of disability and kind of the language I prefer. And I think that's really empowering, for me, but also, as a lot of the speakers have already said today, some people don't want to say the wrong thing. They just don't have the education or the kind of knowledge around disability or cerebral palsy to use the language correctly. So that's another bonus of the access rider, and it also gives a few other things about more acting specific kind of working hours and rehearsal rooms and stuff like that. It also explains that I always have a PA with me, and a bit like Bryony was saying about kind of my relationship with them. So it covers a lot of ground in 7 pages. So I would advise, like I said, I would advise everyone getting it because it just gives you so much control over how people respond to you, and it also just means you don't have to answer the same questions over and over again. So that's my example of self-advocacy, is spend an hour or 2 doing that and it will save you so much time in the future. So yes, so that is my example, and I'm very happy to answer any questions on that because it's been really helpful for me.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm going to bring Bryony back in as well. No, I'm going to try and bring while I'm waiting for that, let's go to, there we go. Let's go to Dean's question. Dean, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Miriam. And Bryony and Kieran, it was good to hear both of your presentations. Just while I'm lowering my hand there. And I just wanted to know, I thought what you, Bryony, you know, when she today, what happened to you, your experience today. I mean, particularly if you, people don't always understand about, people with hidden disabilities, or I think people, it's good that you explain that to them, because perhaps she probably would have got, if you would have got angry, it might have created a different thing. But did you find, obviously, you obviously found it was a positive outcome for you, being reacting the way you did. And and also, Kieran, with your access rider.
Yeah. Obviously,
Yeah.
Other artists that have riders, such as, I don't know, they want a specific alcohol or whatever, but my access riders are very well, you've had these things of like these musicians with these really specific rider requests, like they only want orange M&Ms or whatever it is, but my access riders are a lot more practical.
Yeah, I mean, so they're like a broker, are they, between, they're like a broker between you and your employer,
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a
yeah
questions. It's just there you go. I'm not going to keep repeating the same stuff over and over again. Here's a document with all the usual kind of questions answered, really.
Yeah, and Brian, would you use it, because you're an actor as well, aren't you?
Yeah.
Would you find that useful, or do you find with your PA you perfectly, or with your employer you perfectly,
So I also have an access rider. My main thing is basically that I need someone to travel with me and be with me due to my conditions, and I have an agent who will talk to the casting team or whoever needs to know, and I have regular updates with my agent to see if we need to change things or keep things or get rid of things. So it's like a very close relationship I have with my agent, just so that everyone's on the same page and everyone understands. But 9 times out of 10, it's all been very positive, and I haven't had any negative experiences.
And who provides these services? I mean, who would you go to if you needed an access rider? Who do you approach?
That's all. This is why I didn't read out my one specifically, because everyone has their own, but there's basically templates online to Google, and then you can tailor it to yourself, because there's no point really me reading out mine, because obviously mine's fitted for what I do, but obviously for everyone it's going to be individual. So basically just find a template and fit it to yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much, both of you. Brilliant. Thank
Kieran,
you.
can I just follow up? Just asking, do you think that that's a model that could be adopted? You know, often the acting world is at the forefront of some of the things I think we've talked about before, how within the acting world, we've seen disability being given a bit more of a profile as against other professions. But do you think that that something like a rider could work in other situations?
I think it could applicable to like so many different environments. Basically, it's so good because it doesn't take that much work, because you just follow the templates and change. Like, all the templates have it written for somebody, so you just tweak it to you. So you don't have to sit there and look at a blank page, which is quite scary sometimes. And then you just fit it to whatever you need, and then it's yours. And then you can change it, like Bradley said, and you can just send it to. It doesn't have to just be employers. It can be within educational environments. It can be within whatever. Really, you can fit it to whatever you need. So I'm not ever gonna not have one anymore, and I will keep on top of mine in terms of, as life goes on, you may realise, oh, it'd be really helpful if I had that. So you just add it into your rider, and then you just update your rider and tell people, oh, here's the latest version.
So you might want orange M&Ms then one day.
Well, maybe. Well, it's funny. The reason why they do that, because I was reading about why they do that, and it's about detail. So if they only have orange M&Ms, they know that all the kind of I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And with disability, that's really important. So at the bottom of my one, I say, I need a pack of straws so that I can drink. Now, drinking is quite important. So I know if they've included a pack of straws on set, I know they've read the whole thing. And I know they've read it in detail as well, because they wouldn't leave me without, in their head, obviously, they don't know that I carry straws everywhere, because obviously I wouldn't risk them forgetting. But if I see a pack of straws in my dressing room or whatever, I know they've gone through the whole thing, so I don't need to worry about anything else. But if it doesn't happen, which it hasn't, luckily, I know that there might be other things that they have maybe overlooked. So that's why the orange M&M story from, I can't remember what band it was, but there is a really famous band that does that.
Did you look at that as you did somebody tell you that?
No, I read about it in a book about how you basically self-advocate for yourself, and that's I thought would be a good example for today.
Oh, it's a brilliant example, and I'm wondering, because Beth does lots of advocacy. Sorry to put you on the spot, but whether you have a rider that you carry with you.
sorry about that. Yeah, I do have a rider. So my agent and me, we discuss it. There's things like, for me, there's obviously that I need a support worker. There's also, there might be in my dressing room sensory toys if it's a bit overloaded with information, especially if we've had to do a scene and it's been, because I have PTSD, so if it's anything that can trigger that, I'll then go back and I'll have that there for me for when I need it, if I need it. I can get tired, so they even like have like a chair ready for me, or just simple things like that. But I found that people are like very, very accommodating, and it's even like the little things. They've actually thought, actually maybe we could do that for everyone as well, just so everyone feels like they've got somewhere to go after they've done the work on set. Yeah, it's been really positive.
Yeah, I think it helps everybody because, as we've all said, people worry about asking questions and saying the wrong thing or whatever. But when literally as soon as I get a job, that's the first document they'll read. They'll be like, "Oh, okay." All their kind of anxiety goes from their point of view. And obviously for me it's nice because I don't have to sit there and, like I said, say the same thing over and over again. So
I think we've had lots of conversations about workplace in the past, and people feeling how much should they share with their employees, or their employees feeling uncomfortable. And it just strikes me that that would be a really easy solution, even as a document to start a conversation. And even on a rider, you could say, I'm happy to talk about this, I'm not happy to talk about this, or I will let you know when I need something. You don't need to ask me, or please ask me because I'm open to an open conversation. Even something like that would be really useful, wouldn't it?
That's what right, it gives you full control. You set the tone. You're in control of the kind of narrative or how you want to speak about your disability, and it gives you full agency over that, rather than them being in control if you're only relying on what them asking you questions, they're in control of what information they can get from you. But if you go, here you go, read this, and that gives you far more control.
I just tell you a quick anecdote because I think Beth is typing and I'd really like to hear what she has to say. But just quickly, it makes me sort of chuckle because yesterday Miriam and I went on a to record a podcast, not a podcast, a webinar to a studio, and they'd asked me about my access requirements and what I needed. And anything else we wanted. So I said, yes, Diet Coke, that's what fuels me every day. And lo and behold, when I got there were 2 Diet Cokes waiting for us. So I didn't realise I was writing a rider, but actually I probably was.
You started your rider. Yeah.
I've started my rider already. Mine's not orange M&Ms, but definitely Diet Coke. Beth, do you have a rider?
I haven't heard of it, but now I really, really want one, especially with my parents. They're getting older and I need to take charge more, but a rider would prepare people about how I communicate and not speak to my personal assistants.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. And I was also going to go on to ask a little bit about Bryony, when you were talking about from the health point of view, that you were told you couldn't bring your parents or your mum, and that you've came up with the really brilliant solution of your support worker. And I'm just like thinking about from that perspective, how did that process work for you? Did you find that an easy decision to come to, an easy solution to, or was it something you navigated with them, what would work for you and what would work for them?
I knew that my psychiatrist didn't want my mum in the room, and so I'm not sure really how it just started. We kind of just started talking, and then we kind of came up with this idea that maybe I go with my support worker, and then I told my doctor, yeah, this is my support worker, and he was like, oh, okay. And it kind of, he was happy about it because he had never had someone with cerebral palsy before.
So you were setting giving him a new experience as well.
Yeah.
Which was an education for him. And Karen, how does it work for you? Have you had an issue with needing or wanting like somebody else with you for medical appointments?
Well, I think the medical system is fundamentally ableist. It does not. I'm quite strong in it. They very much adopt the medical model of disability in place of a social model. And maybe to link what Bryony said and what I said, maybe we need some sort of medical riders as well, where you set out how you want to discuss your disability. And I don't know, I'm just making that up on the spot. But yeah, it's a really hard one because obviously doctors have power, and or they are in the position of power. But I think, a bit like the speaker earlier was saying, it's important that we kind of self-advocate, to use the correct term for this evening, and stick up for ourselves and say, no, this is our lives, and we're gonna do what we want, and know that we're experts in our own lived experience. And just because they may have a certificate that says that they know about CP, they may, and I'm not doubting their knowledge on what they've studied, but also our lived experience of our individual CP is really important. So I think I'm fairly used to telling doctors what to do now, but that's only because I've had a lifetime of having to self-advocate, and yeah, a bit like the other speaker was saying earlier about not doing it in a polite way, not shouting at them like I would have done when I was a lot younger, and playing a way of navigating the kind of power dynamics between a doctor and a patient.
Brilliant, thank you for that.